I still can't believe what happened, but I have to tell this story. I never imagined that something as simple as helping my family would lead to a situation like this. It started off innocently enough. My mum asked me to pitch in for my sister's wedding expenses, and I agreed. After all, I had always been the responsible one, the one who did what was asked of me without question. Little did I know, my help was about to lead me down a path of betrayal, lies, and the darkest kind of revenge. It wasn't long before my sister's wedding planning turned into something far more than just a financial burden. My mum, who had always been supportive in her own way, began demanding more and more from me, guilt-tripping me into paying for things I could barely afford. She made it seem like this was my duty. After all, my sister had always been the golden child, and I had always been the one to pick up the slack. But it wasn't just the money, it was the way I was treated. I was expected to just give, and give, while my sister got everything she wanted without lifting a finger. Things came to a head when I found out a secret that completely changed my perspective. My sister, who had always pretended to be the sweet innocent one, was hiding something from me. Something that, if people knew, would completely ruin her perfect image. I wasn't sure if I should expose her, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized she deserved to be called out. She had manipulated everyone around her, using her charm to get what she wanted, while I was left footing the bill, emotionally and financially. But this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. So, I did what I had never done before. I dug into her past, uncovering secrets that no one knew about, and when I finally confronted her, I had everything I needed to destroy her reputation. But the truth wasn't just about exposing her lies. It was about making her feel the consequences of taking advantage of me. I wasn't going to let her ruin my life any longer. I had worked hard for what I had, and if she thought she could manipulate me into paying for her wedding without facing the truth, she was in for a rude awakening. Looking back, I can see how things had been building up for years. I've always been the dependable one in the family, the one who could be counted on to make sacrifices, to help others even when it meant putting my own needs aside. I guess it's just the way I was raised. My mom always said that family comes first, and I took that to heart. That's why, when she asked me to contribute to my sister's wedding fund, I didn't think twice. I figured it was just part of being family, and I was happy to help, at first. But my sister, Rachel, has always been the one to get everything handed to her on a silver platter. It's not like she's a bad person, she just knows how to charm everyone around her. From the time we were kids, Rachel always had that special quality that made everyone want to help her. She's beautiful, outgoing, and effortlessly likable. I can't even count how many times she'd talk her way into getting what she wanted, all while making it look like she was doing everyone a favor. It wasn't always like this. Growing up, I was the one who had to work for everything. I did well in school, held down jobs throughout high school and college, and always tried to be the good daughter to my parents. But Rachel? She was the free spirit. She never had to try as hard. I watched her float through life, getting away with things I could only dream of. And while I loved my sister, I couldn't help but feel resentment building inside me over the years. The constant comparisons, the favoritism, the way she could get away with anything because of her charm, it took a toll on me. But still, I always put those feelings aside. I didn't want to be bitter. She was my sister, after all. So, when she announced her engagement, I was happy for her. She'd met a great guy, and I could see how much she loved him. The problem wasn't with her wedding itself, but with the way my mum expected me to contribute financially. It wasn't just a small gift or a helping hand, it was everything. I was expected to pay for the majority of the expenses, even though Rachel had more than enough resources to contribute on her own. At first, I tried to politely decline. I had my own bills to pay, and the thought of emptying my savings for her wedding felt unfair. But my mum was relentless. She guilt-tripped me with the usual lines. "You're the responsible one, you can afford it. And Rachel needs this, she's always had so many setbacks." The emotional pressure was too much, and I caved. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, especially my mum, who kept telling me that this was my chance to show how much I loved Rachel. I watched helplessly as my mom and Rachel played their game. Rachel was carefree, enjoying the wedding planning, while I was the one paying for it all. The wedding dress, the venue, the catering, everything was piling up. My savings started to dwindle, and I had no choice but to dip into my emergency fund. My own life was becoming a financial strain, but I kept telling myself it was for family. What else could I do? It was supposed to be a temporary sacrifice. But then, one night, as I was talking to a friend, she casually mentioned that Rachel had been asking around for additional wedding funds. My friend had overheard a conversation where Rachel was telling someone that she'd already gotten everything she needed from me, but she was hoping to get some more, just in case. This was the first time I realized that Rachel had no intention of paying me back. She wasn't just relying on me because she couldn't afford it. She was taking advantage of me because she knew I would say yes. That was when I started questioning everything. Why was I allowing myself to be used like this? Why did I always say yes, even when it was clear that Rachel didn't value my sacrifices? It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that my sister, who had everything handed to her, expected me to provide for her wedding while she continued to live in luxury. The tipping point came when I discovered something else, something I hadn't expected, something that shattered any last remaining loyalty I had to her. I found out that Rachel had been hiding a secret, one that could ruin her perfect life if anyone knew about it. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks, and I realized that I had been the one left in the shadows, the one constantly paying for her mistakes while she kept everything hidden. It was time for me to stop playing the role of the selfless sister. Once I discovered Rachel's secret, everything changed. The anger I'd felt about the financial burden now seemed trivial compared to the knowledge I had gained. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, deception, and the fact that my sister had been manipulating me for years. For a while, I didn't know what to do with the information. I considered confronting her immediately, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to just have a conversation. Rachel would deny everything, or worse, she would twist the situation to make it look like I was the villain. Instead, I decided to take my time. I knew that I had to play this smart. I needed to expose her in a way that would make her feel the full weight of the betrayal she had been putting me through. But to do that, I had to gather evidence. I wasn't going to let her off the hook this time. I had put my life on hold for her and my mom, and it had taken a toll on me, emotionally and financially. It was time to make her pay. The first step was finding out everything I could about the secret Rachel had been hiding. It wasn't hard. Once you start looking, the pieces begin to fall into place. Rachel had been secretly dating a man she had known for years, even though she had been telling everyone else that she was happily single. It wasn't just a casual fling either. This guy was married, with kids, and had been for years, but Rachel's charm and manipulative ways had kept the affair a secret from everyone, including my parents. To make matters worse, she had been living off of him financially while I was paying for her wedding. I was sickened by the hypocrisy. She had the nerve to ask me for help, to guilt-trip me into paying for her wedding, all while secretly receiving money from this married man. It felt like she had built this entire fake life, a life where she was the perfect daughter and the perfect sister, while I was the one doing all the work, the one who got nothing in return. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much power I now had. I knew something that could ruin her perfect wedding, ruin the image she had spent years crafting. But I didn't just want to expose her to our parents. No, that would have been too easy. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand just how much she had used me. So I started digging deeper. I went through old messages and photos, things I had previously overlooked. I knew that Rachel wasn't the type to leave a trail behind, but I was determined to find something I could use. Then, one day, I found it. A message between Rachel and the married man she had been seeing. It was an exchange of flirtatious texts, but what struck me was the part where she mentioned how much money he had given her to help with her wedding costs. My heart sank as I read it over and over again. I had been pouring all my money into her wedding, while she had been receiving it from him. It was time to act. I started making phone calls to the wedding vendors, pretending to be Rachel. It wasn't hard to get the information I needed. I'd learned how to imitate her voice and mannerisms over the years, something she would never suspect I'd be capable of doing. I knew that if I could pull this off, I could not only destroy her wedding plans, but also expose the truth about the man who had been funding it all behind my back. My plan was set. I was going to crash her wedding. I wasn't going to let her walk down the aisle without knowing what I had uncovered. I had everything ready. The evidence, the texts, and a surprise that would leave her speechless. But there was one more thing I had to do before the big day. I needed to make sure my parents knew the truth, and that meant I had to present it in a way that wouldn't allow them to dismiss it. I gathered everything I had, photos, texts, and a detailed timeline of the affair, and I called them over for dinner. I knew it was risky, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't going to be silenced by guilt or the fear of ruining her wedding. She had ruined enough of my life already. I told them the truth, and as I watched their faces go from confusion to shock, I realized that I was finally taking control of my life. I wasn't going to let Rachel's lies, manipulation, and sense of entitlement define me any longer. This was the moment when everything changed. The night of Rachel's wedding arrived, and everything was set into motion. I could feel the excitement and anticipation building up inside me, but there was also a sense of calm. I had already exposed the truth to my parents, who were still in shock, trying to process what I had just shared with them. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and I knew it would only be a matter of time before they saw Rachel for who she truly was. But tonight, it wasn't about them. It was about her. It was about making sure she understood the full extent of her betrayal. I arrived at the venue early. Rachel had been too preoccupied with last-minute wedding details to notice my subtle movements, and I knew she was too busy to suspect that anything was about to happen. I moved through the crowd, pretending to be just another guest, with my phone in hand. I had been preparing for this moment for days, and I was finally ready to put my plan into action. First, I made sure everything was in place with the vendors. I had already arranged to have her wedding cake replaced with a completely different one, a simple gesture, but one that would make a big impact. I also made sure that the music she had chosen would be replaced with something unexpected. I wasn't trying to ruin her wedding entirely, but I wanted her to feel like she had no control over anything anymore. Every little thing was going to show her that I had the power, not her. But the most important part of my plan was still to come. It was time to expose Rachel in front of everyone, to tear down the perfect life she had built for herself. As the ceremony began, I stood off to the side, watching Rachel walk down the aisle. Her smile was bright, her eyes filled with tears as she gazed at her soon-to-be husband. But behind that smile, I could see the cracks. I could see the anxiety building up beneath the surface. The anxiety I knew was coming. This wasn't going to be the wedding she had dreamed of. Not anymore. When it was time for the vows, I slipped out of the crowd unnoticed. I made my way to the back of the venue, where my phone was ready. I had already sent my parents the proof, the texts, the photos, and the details of Rachel's affair. I had told them where to find it, how to view it. And I knew that the moment I sent it, Rachel's perfect world would begin to crumble. As the vows were being exchanged, I hit send. Almost immediately, I saw my parents' faces change. The texts came through, and they read them, one after another, in shock. The guests around them started to notice their reactions. The whispers began, but Rachel didn't know. She was too caught up in the moment, too focused on the ceremony to realize what was happening behind the scenes. And then, just as the final vows were being said, my parents stood up. My mom's face was pale, her hand shaking as she held up her phone for everyone to see. The whole room fell silent as they read the messages out loud, one by one. Rachel's affair, her manipulation, the lies she had been hiding, all of it was exposed in front of her friends, family. Rachel's smile faltered. She looked around the room, trying to process what was happening. The guests were stunned. Some were confused, while others who had known something was off about her stared in disbelief. I watched as her world fell apart. The lies, the facade, all of it was crumbling around her. As the truth spread, Rachel's face turned red with embarrassment. She stammered, trying to justify herself, but it was too late. The damage was done. She had been caught and there was no way out. The guests who had once admired her began to turn their backs on her, murmuring amongst themselves. Her fiancé stood there in shock, clearly unsure of what to say or do. The wedding she had dreamed of was over in an instant. And then, in the midst of the chaos, I stepped forward. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there watching her squirm. Rachel turned to me, her eyes full of confusion and anger. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this to me?" I took a deep breath and said, "Because you've taken everything from me. I've been there for you, paid for your wedding, and you've been lying to everyone, including me. You thought you could use me, and you thought you could get away with it. But not anymore. This is the truth, Rachel." The silence was deafening. It was the moment I had waited for, the moment where everything she had done was exposed for all to see. She had no control, no power anymore. And as I watched her try to salvage whatever dignity she had left, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For once, I was in control. Rachel's perfect life was no more, and it was all because of the truth. The fallout from Rachel's wedding disaster was swift and harsh. After I exposed her secrets, the whole room seemed to turn on her in an instant. There was no saving face, no way to undo what had just happened. Rachel, who had always been the center of attention in our family, was suddenly nothing more than a pariah. Her perfect wedding turned into a humiliating spectacle that would follow her for years. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, but there was also a certain emptiness that came with it. I had spent so long being the one to clean up her messes, to support her, and to let her manipulate me. Watching her crumble under the weight of her own lies was cathartic, but it also felt like I had lost something too, something I hadn't realized I had been holding on to for so long. The hope that maybe, just maybe, things would change between us. Rachel didn't just lose her wedding that day, she lost everything she had carefully crafted. Her fiancé, who had no idea about the affair, left her almost immediately. I could see the hurt in his eyes as he walked away, unable to comprehend how the woman he was about to marry had betrayed him so completely. Some of her friends tried to console her, but most of them distanced themselves, unwilling to get caught up in the drama. In the end, it was just Rachel, left alone with the consequences of her own actions. As for my parents, their reaction was predictable, though still heartbreaking. My mum was furious with me at first, saying I should have just talked to her, not aired the family's dirty laundry in front of everyone. But the truth was, I had tried to talk to Rachel. I had tried to make her see the damage she was doing, to make her understand how much I had sacrificed for her. But she didn't care. She never cared. It took a while for my mum to come around. She still wanted to defend Rachel, but it was clear that the truth was undeniable. Slowly, she began to see what I had been trying to tell her for years. Rachel had manipulated all of us, using our love and trust as a tool to get what she wanted. I think, deep down, my mum was just as disappointed in Rachel as I was, but it wasn't easy for her to admit it. The aftermath of that day was painful but necessary. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control over my own story. No longer was I the one who had to clean up after Rachel's messes. No longer would I sacrifice my happiness for the sake of family. I had done what I had to do, and in the end, it was the right thing. As for Rachel, she tried, of course, to fix things. She called me multiple times in the weeks after the wedding, begging for forgiveness. She promised that she would change, that she would make things right. But I had learned my lesson. I wasn't the same person I had been before all of this. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. I didn't return her calls. I didn't answer her messages. And eventually, she stopped trying. I moved on with my life. Mark and I got married shortly after Rachel's wedding debacle, and we've never been happier. My relationship with my parents is strained, but I've accepted that I'm not going to be the one who keeps everything together anymore. I've learned to put myself first, to protect my peace, and to no longer be the one who picks up the pieces for others. Rachel, on the other hand, went through a rough patch. Her reputation was tarnished, and she lost many friends. I heard she tried to salvage things by starting over somewhere new, but it was clear she would never have the same kind of support network she had once had. People saw her for what she truly was. someone who would betray anyone to get what she wanted. I don't know where Rachel is now, I don't care. What matters is that I took control of my life, and I'm finally living it for myself. No more being the responsible one, no more sacrificing my happiness for the sake of someone else. And Rachel? Well, she learned the hard way that you can't take advantage of people forever. You can't manipulate your way through life without facing the consequences. In the end, I'm the one who came out on top. I exposed her, and I freed myself from her web of lies. I'm stronger now, and I know I'm never going to let anyone take advantage of me again.